Hello, and welcome to this demonstration of Onshape. My name is Marsha Wingard, and I will be walking through the basics of using Onshape. And that is a program, a CAD program that is browser-based, so you don't need to download or install anything. There is also an app version if you have an iPad or an Android device. You can get the app as well. But I'm going to demonstrate using the browser version. I am in the main screen that you reach after you have installed the software. I have several folders created, which you won't have to begin with, but I find it helpful for organizing my projects. And then you can see that I have documents listed below here. And Onshape refers to any project that you create as a document. And then within that document, you can have multiple parts. But we're going to just jump right in and start with creating. I'm going to click on create, use the same button if you wanted to create a document or a folder. We're just going to create a document, and I'm going to name it to begin with. And so this is going to just be practice, and we'll go with that for now. That will take us to the main design screen. And this is our work plane, work area. And you'll notice right here at the front in the beginning, there are three work planes. You have your top work plane. So that would be as if you were looking down on top of the object you're creating. There's a front work plane, so as if you were standing in front of it and looking straight on. And then the right work plane as if you're looking at it from the side. It doesn't really matter what plane you choose to design on, but you do have to choose a plane. And I usually choose that just based on the project and what makes the most sense at the time. But when you start designing, the first thing that Onshape will ask you is what plane you want to work on, and that is what it's referring to. So these are the work planes. They also correspond to these labels over here on the left. So if I select top, you can see that that is selected. I can select multiple planes at once, not for designing, but just for the purposes of selecting them. So I can select all three of those. I can also deselect them. I can also hide them. So if I don't want to see it, I just want to look at the object that I'm creating, I can get rid of those. And I can even remove that point of origin, and then you don't really see anything. But I usually keep them all showing when I am working in Onshape. So I'm just going to turn them all back on. There we go. So those are our default geometry. Up here at the top, you have your feature menu. These are the things that you can do to a sketch once it's already created. You have to create a sketch first, and so we'll do that in just a moment. But the first thing you'll do is create a sketch, and then you can do things to that sketch. And then over here on the right hand side, we have our view cube that you can use to navigate. So if I click on top here, it automatically reorients my view to be looking down on the top plane. If I scroll with my mouse, I'm on my right mouse button and just clicking and moving forward and back, or side to side, that allows me to rotate the view cube as well. So I can click on the view cube with my left mouse to move around, but I can also, with my right mouse button, move and drag over here. This other cube, the smaller one, allows me to choose different camera options. So if I wanted to go back to that original view, that isometric view, I can just click that and it takes me right back to where I started. So that is really helpful. I come back and forth to this view cube when I'm designing all the time. So that's a really helpful tool to know. This bar right here is called a rollback bar. You can't see much right now because I haven't created anything yet, but I will demonstrate that for you later. And then the other thing to be aware of is that as you create different parts, parts are listed down here. You can create multiple parts and have multiple part studios, and then you can assemble them together. We're really going to just focus on creating simple parts to begin with, and that's the focus of this demo. So the very first thing I am going to do in this project is create a sketch, and this is where you will start all of your projects. So I'm going to start a sketch. The first thing it will ask me is to select a sketch plane. So I'm going to choose the top plane as if I were looking down on the surface. I'm just going to use my mouse to kind of roll to the side so you can see that it is selecting that top plane instead of the other two. The other thing I often do is I will reorient my view cube so that I'm looking straight down on it. So if I move my mouse, you can see that I'm moving it around, but I really like to be looking straight down on the thing that I'm designing. So I'm in the sketch, I've selected my plane. The first thing I'm going to do is just draw a line. And I don't always start from the point of origin, but I often find that it's helpful. So I can click where I start, and then when I click again, and I just can keep clicking and making a shape. If I were to create something like that. A lot of many of the tools require you to create a closed shape before you can use them. So like if I wanted to extrude or evolve something, I need to close the shape. So when I bring that line back to the point where I started, you'll see that it turned gray and close the shape. This little box here means I can adjust that measurement. So let's say I wanted to change that to 15. I could do that. Once I enter a measurement, it locks that measurement in. You'll notice that it changed that color here to black. That means that that measurement is set. And I usually will name my sketches. So I'm just going to call this base. The reason I do that is because as you continue working and creating more sketches, the default is to just to name them sketch 1, sketch 2, sketch 3. And after a while, it's hard to remember, well, which one was sketch 1, which was sketch 2, what did I draw there? So I find it helpful to name them as I go. So once I have a basic sketch, and I'm going to just rotate here so you can see this is a 2-dimensional sketch. I've drawn it on the top plane. If I flip to the side, it has no depth to it whatsoever. It is not 3-dimensional yet. I'm just going to click back to the top. Okay, but if I wanted to revolve this, if I wanted to take it and wrap it around, for instance, I could select this revolve tool. It kind of looks like a donut that somebody took a bite out of. So if I click on revolve, I've already selected this base. If I had not selected it, it would be gray and it would be asking me to select a sketch to revolve, but I'm going to select that. And then I have to tell it where I want it to revolve. Is it going to revolve around this line? Is it going to revolve around this line? I'm going to actually have it revolve along this center line. So I'm going to select, so I've got this selected here. I'm going to select that. And then it immediately creates that revolution. And it's currently set at full. And so it did a full 360-degree rotation. So if you're doing something round, this is really helpful because it's uniform all the way around. I'm going to come back to the top. I could also do one direction and change the amount. So if I just wanted to be a partial rotation, if I wanted it to go in 2 directions and a small amount in each direction, there's a lot of options. Most of the time when I've used it, I've done a full revolve. That's just because that was what I was working on at the time, but you can do either one. I usually name those as well. So I could say base revolve, and then I would know that that was what I had done there. So that's just an example of creating a sketch and then revolving it. And I'm just going to show you the rollback real quick. But the rollback allows me to go back. So if I wanted to, hide that revolve and see the base, I can kind of hide that and then show it again. I could also come back into my base and edit it. And you do have to be careful when you do that because if you it's possible to make changes to your drawing that then will prevent the revolve from working properly. But let's say I just wanted to change this and make it wider and do something like that. You'll notice that it changed the revolution that follows after. So any change that I make to a previous step is going to impact the further steps. Okay, so that is just a quick basic overview of Revolve. For the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to delete these two sketches. This is how you delete. Just right click and delete. That's how you also would go in to edit or copy or rename a sketch. But I'm just going to delete that one. And I'm going to start with a new sketch. And this time, I'll still stick with the top and select this sketch plane. Again, you have to select the sketch plane. And this time I'm going to try doing a center point circle. So select center point circle. I'm going to put my my cursor right on the center on the origin. Now, I don't have to draw it on the origin. I could put a circle out here. I'm just going to draw mine on the origin. And I'm dragging it out. It's a center point circle. You'll notice that it pops up this box and I can immediately enter my dimensions. So I'm going to go to 50 millimeters and it sets that dimension. I can also, well, yeah, I'm just going to leave it right there for now. So I'm just going to call this my circle and be good to go. All right, so again, I just have a two-dimensional sketch. And I want to make this more of a pillar. So I'm going to select my sketch and then I'm going to select extrude. And you can do that in the other order. I'm going to cancel out of that. I could choose extrude first. And then the first thing it's going to ask me is, what do I want to extrude? And I want to extrude this circle. It automatically defaults to 25 millimeters. We can't really see what it's doing because we're looking straight down. But if I rotate just a bit, you can see that it has extruded out 25 millimeters. Now I can adjust that depth over here by typing in numbers, but I can also just grab that arrow and you can see the numbers over here adjusting as I go. So I can make that more higher or lower. I can also change the direction by just clicking this arrow here or by clicking this arrow here, and that changes the direction. So depending on what you're making. So that is extrude. And again, I usually will rename that, especially when I'm doing multiple extrudes in the same project. I'll do that. I'll rename it circle extrude. So there we go. So now I have a little pillar. Now something else I can do if I wanted to is I could create another sketch. I'm going to come back to my top view. Actually, I'm going to stay at the side just so you can see what I'm doing. Create another sketch. I'm going to select. So now I can select this plane if I wanted to create my sketch on this plane, or I could create my sketch like I want to do this one on the top plane. I want to do it on the top of this piece that I just created. So I'm going to select that as my sketching surface. And so you can see that this sketch one, it corresponds with the name here. So if I rename it here, it's going to rename that here. You can see that it's on top of that pillar. So I'm creating a sketch on top of that pillar. Let's say I'm going to do a little center point rectangle. I'm going to view face down on the top. I picked center point, so again, it's going to go from the center. And let's drag that out. And let's say I want that to be 15 millimeters in that direction. And let's just go with 15 that direction. So I'm going to constrain that to 15 millimeters in each direction. Okay, and I'm going to call this, let's call this an insert, and you'll see why we're going to name it that. So I have this sketch. It's on top of the first shape that I made. And then I'm going to choose extrude again. I'm going to select this shape that I just made, this little square. This is what I want to extrude, and you'll see that it selected it and it's automatically assuming I'm adding 25 millimeters. That seems to be the default. But I want to I want to take away some of this cylinder that I created. So I'm going to select remove, and it automatically changed the direction there. And it set it to 25 millimeters. So it's removing all the way down inside. I only want to go about 5 millimeters. Let's say I'm not going to go that deep. Okay, and you can see the arrow jumped back up to where I placed it, and I'm going to name this insert XT to differentiate that from the circle, EXT, extrude. And now you can see I have that little indent in the end of my pillar. So that's another way that you can use the extrude tool. Some other things that I can do to this shape, I'm going to set it so that I can view the front. There is a tool up here called Fillet, and this allows you to kind of create a curved edge. So right now, if you look at that edge, it's like it's going straight up and then it's going 90 degree over. It's a sharp edge, but maybe I want this to be a little bit curved. So I'm gonna, right now the radius is set to 1 millimeter. If I change that to 4 millimeters, you'll be able to see it a little better. So you can see how that made a rounded edge there. So that is called a fillet, and it applied it all the way around. Now I could also say that I wanted to have that fillet here and here, here. Oh, it is not liking that. Oh, it's crashing into each other. So I think that is why that's not working. I wonder if I did it smaller. Nope, I'm going to undo that. I'm just going to undo these. I'm just going to keep my fillet on the outside, change it back to 5 millimeters. Okay, there we go. But let's say I wanted to do something to this inner part as well. I would just create another fillet and select each of these parts. And I'm going to have them all go out, and I'm going to have them go out less, maybe like 2 millimeters for some reason. There we go. So I just created those as two separate features. Okay, so those are just a couple of things you can do. I could create a chamfer at the other end. So where the fillet is rounded, the chamfer is a little more straight. So I can select, and you can see the difference there. So one is rounded and one is just kind of beveled. A chamfer is kind of like a bevel. So that's an example of a chamfer. And again, I could rename these parts as I go. Another thing that I can do is the shell tool. So let's say I wanted to hollow out the end of my shape. So I can choose the shell tool, and then I'm going to pick right here, and I'm going to rotate it around so that you can see. And I can specify the shell thickness. So if I wanted that to be 4 millimeters, I can make that a little bit thicker. And you can see that indent at the top is going to interfere with that a little bit, like it's going to come down inside. So there's a lot of different things you can do. Now, I will say this shape would be very difficult to print because, well, if I printed it this way, it'd probably be okay, but you always have to be thinking about how are you going to create supports. Because it can't just create this open cavity. It's going to have to build some support. So that's one of the things you have to think about with 3D printing and designing. But those are just some of the features, some of the basic features. There's many others, but that will at least get you started with Onshape.